if Iran falls, what could be the consequences for India, Russia, and China? In episode 318, while discussing Venezuela in the context of China, you named China's sources of oil. You mentioned some countries that, but skipped Iran. Did I? Did I skip Iran? Okay. In public documents, Iran doesn't come up as a major source of oil for China, but my own digging shows that a lot of Iranian oil is relabeled to Malaysian, Omani, Emirati tankers flagged to those nations before going to China. In that sense, Iran supplies about 10 to 15% of oil to China. Of course, China-Iran 25-year partnership is also there. With that in mind, a lot of things start to click. I think Iran might topple rather soon, and the US is very rapidly making gains to encircle China. It's all happening in front of us. Fascinating thoughts. Okay, I'm not sure what I said in episode 318. I do remember I listed the sources of oil in the context of Venezuela, what's happening there for China. So about 15-20% comes um, from the Saudis, 15-20% comes from Russia. I would say 15% plus will also come from Iran. And I must have mentioned at some point in the episode that the Chinese have this 25-year strategic agreement with Iran, in which one of the clauses and whatever it is. I mean, it's kind of a secret agreement. But what's known is that the Chinese will make massive investments in the Iranian energy sector and other sectors, and in exchange, the Chinese will receive copious amounts of pretty cheap energy from Iran, which is oil. So yeah, 10, 15, maybe 20% of Chinese oil comes from Iran. Now, if the Americans topple the regime in Tehran and bring about democracy, then that democracy will be controlled by the US. So Iran will become a US vassal, which means the US will once again control Iranian oil the way it used to be before 1979. Before 1979, who controlled Iran's oil? It was the US. And now, once again, if this happens, a regime change in Tehran, in Iran, then the Americans will once again control Iranian oil. Maybe they will allow the Iranian new government to export some oil to China. Maybe they will not. So that it then becomes, uh, the Americans can exercise whatever choice they want. That becomes the situation, right? So it looks like Iran may fall soon. Then the question is, what could be the consequences for India, China, Russia? Okay, let's first deal with India. We haven't opened the map yet, so let's go and take a look at what the map has to tell us. Okay, let's see the map. And here is the map. Let's remove the question from the screen for a bit. So we're talking about Iran here, right? Iran. So north of Iran, you have the Caspian Sea, you have the Caucasus region, Azerbaijan, Armenia, etc. You have Turkmenistan, you have Afghanistan to the east, and Pakistan to the east. Okay, and down south you have the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, and the Gulf of Oman. So if the Americans take Iran, effect a regime change in Iran, and Iran becomes American property essentially, then everything will change in the region. The Americans they don't anymore need to blockade the Strait of Hormuz. The support that the Yemeni Ansar Allah faction or the Houthi faction gets from the Iranians will stop entirely, which will make it very easy for the Americans to, I mean, not very easy, but easier for the Americans to do a regime change in Yemen as well. What else will happen? Armenia could fall. See, Armenia is being, the Turks and the Azerbaijanis want to erase Armenia from the map of the world. The Turks want to create a pan-Turan corridor from Turkey all the way to Turkmenistan across the Caspian Sea by wiping out Armenia from the map of the world. The Turks want to conclude what they started in the 1890s all the way to 1915. Right? They want to conclude that, and Armenia is surviving because India is supplying weapons to Armenia through Iran. So the Iranians are delivering Indian weapons to Armenia by road. So Armenia could very rapidly fall if Iran becomes a US asset. Then if Iran becomes a US asset, then look at the subcontinent. Iran is a US asset. Pakistan is a US asset. Afghanistan is kind of dependent on the US for money, etc. Yeah. So what you could have very soon if Iran falls to the US is you could soon have American troops in Pakistan occupied Kashmir. In recent years, you had the situation where you had Chinese troops in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, right? Correct? You had that situation. You had Chinese troops in Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Now China and Pakistan are no longer in that relationship that they had. Okay. Um, the Pakistan is now a US asset, US vassal. If Iran also becomes a US vassal, then that gives Pakistan tremendous strategic depth. It gives the Americans strategic depth in the region. Um, the Balochistan issue is over. They will be able to deal with it, and the Americans may even have American troops coming all the way into Pakistan occupied Kashmir and knocking on India's door. Okay, and in case there is an Operation Sindoor 2.0, then Iran will come to the aid of Pakistan. So these are some of the implications for India if Iran falls. We know that it's the regime of the mullahs. We know it's deeply unpopular in Iran. We know that the people of Iran want freedom from this. I understand. I completely understand that. And from the perspective of the Iranian people, maybe they need a change. Yeah. But from India's perspective, it's going to be a disaster the moment there's a regime change in Tehran, because it's going to be a pro-US and pro-Pakistan regime that comes into power. They will say nice things about India. Okay, Indians love nice words. And the moment there's a regime change and the new regime says nice things about India will start dancing. No, sab theek hai. Everything is good. No, there's no problem. Wait and watch. Ignore the words, see the actions that will come later. So if there is Operation Sindoor 2.0, Iran will support Pakistan. And you will have, most likely, soon American troops, or maybe Iranian troops, not Iranian troops, maybe American troops in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and so on. What about China if Iran falls? Well, then China loses, potentially loses the 15-20% of energy that it imports from Iran. So if you look at China's pie, 100% pie, 15-20% comes from Saudi Arabia, 15-20% comes from Russia, 15-20% comes from Iran. Then you have nations like Iraq, then you have nations like Nigeria and Angola and so on. It's got a basket, it's a diversified basket of places from which it acquires oil and gas. So big chunk now is controlled by the US, which is Iran. Iraq is also controlled by the US. Saudi Arabia, UAE, all of that is also controlled by the US. Nigeria is also controlled by the US. Everything, essentially, whatever China imports from, all the places now become controlled by the US, except for Russia. So that forces China and Russia closer together. And what's the consequences for Russia? Well, Russia can no longer acquire the Shahed 2 drones and whatever drones it was buying from Iran. It loses an ally south of the Caspian, and it gets more isolated. Right? So, yeah, it's going to be a domino effect if Tehran falls, and it looks like it could fall anytime now.